is such an important part of our textures, and often it's going to be one of the first things that our audience is going to see on the model itself. We need to look at how we can create small little variations in the color pattern to give us that sense of believability and grounded realism that we're always striving for. Objects out there in the real world are never just a singular color. They're actually more than one color. And even though my shell kind of appears as though it's generally kind of brown and shades of tan, it really is more than just one color. It's about 3 or 4 different things all happening simultaneously to create the effect itself. Here it is with everything rocking and rolling. It's looking pretty good. And I want to show you how I go through this process. And I have many apologies. I forgot to turn on this last one. There it is. So we actually have a whole series of textures that are responsible, or a whole series of layers that are responsible for creating the color of our channel, or of our textures, excuse me. Keep in mind that when we're working in Substance Painter, we're actually working on a whole series of channels whose combined aggregate creates the final result. We've looked at height, we've looked at roughness, now let's look at color. I like to do color after height and roughness because I get to use that height and roughness information to determine if my color scheme is working correctly. All of these objects or all of these channels are working together to create the final result. So we need to start kind of experimenting with how color is going to be influencing my understanding of the roughness and my understanding of the height. Let me take you through the process of how I created all of this, and then we'll take a look. Okay, so here's where we left off. And of course, we're going to start with the fill layer. These fill layers are just fantastic tools, and I'm going to put it down below my height values here. Excuse me. And let's start looking at how we can adjust the properties of our fill layer to start creating this illusion that we're after. Okay, so we know that this is just going to be for color, so I'm going to turn off everything but the color values itself. Now this is something that I like to do. It's just a personal workflow. It makes it a little bit easier for me and my simple brain to understand the role and influence of this layer into the larger layer stack itself. And now we get to start being creative and finding some colors that work. This initial color blocking is an important part of our sequence. So spend some time, look at some reference. We have a great little eyedropper here that will allow us to color pick from other images inside the scene itself. Now I'm going to work from the bottom and go upwards. I know that I want to have my shell be kind of a nice tan. And yeah, that may be a good place to start. I'm going to make it a little bit brighter so you guys can see the influence of some of these next steps. Yeah, and I'm liking that. Whenever we're creating color, it's a good idea to have maybe 2 or 3 different layers that are working together to get the final result itself. And this first one, this is like our base layer. This is our base color. And we're going to start adding some values, some variations on top of it. And just with that one color, you can already start to see the importance of having a few colors in the mix here to define the realism of our object, the believability. Nothing is ever just a singular color in our textures and in our world. There are small, subtle variations inside of the system itself, which is pretty neat. Okay, so this is a good place to start. I'm going to duplicate this layer. There we go. And now I'm going to pick a variation of it. Now, when you're making variations, it's good to have 2 that are generally close to each other. So I have maybe a brown and maybe a lighter brown or a darker brown. And then the third one, the third color layer is going to be an accent color, something that's just going to give us a little bit of a highlight, kind of punch, if you will. I'm going to make this next one just a little bit brighter in value. And then we're going to start masking between them. And this is really where the power of the Substance engine comes in. We have 2 color layers here. We have a light one and a darker one. And I'm going to mask the lighter one. Let's just label them so you guys can follow along. This is darker. This is dark. Let's put dark brown. Dark brown. Light brown. And now we're going to make a mask on the light brown one so that we can deactivate certain parts of this image to see the underlying texture below it. Let's create a black mask. And this time, we're not going to create a paint effect like we did earlier with the height, but we are going to make an effect. But we're going to do a fill effect on the layer mask itself. So we'll go into the magic wand, and now we're going to do a fill. This fill effect ultimately allows us to load in a procedural image, a grunge map, like we did earlier with our roughness channels, into the mask itself. Let's do it real fast. So here's the fill effect. We get of course, a color slider down here at the bottom, but most importantly, we're going to get this image well, which will allow us to load in an image. Let's go shopping for one. I really don't know what I'm doing here. Let's see. Let's do something like this. Let's see what we get. Yeah, you can just barely see the impact of it inside the mesh itself. So there's some things in here that we probably should look to change. Here, to make it really obvious, and I do this from time to time, I'll crank the values of my color. So now I have this really intense orange, and that's exposing the darker shades of brown from this layer underneath. And this gives me a little bit more information as to what adjustments I can make to the grunge map on the mask. Let's do this. Let's go into the grunge map and let's invert it. Let's see what we get. Yeah, now that's a little bit more like it because now we're seeing more brown and less of the orange. In addition, what if we change the balance a little bit? Now we're seeing more of the brown and less of the orange. Yeah, that's kind of neat. At this stage, I like to go shopping. Let's try something else. Let's try the one next to it. This one has a little bit more kind of a swirly pattern, which I don't think is going to work for my object. Yeah, this one's pretty neat. I'm liking the pattern here. I like these big stripes, but I think they're going the wrong way. And when we're working with images, we can continue to refine the orientation and the projection of these images inside of our properties. And that's what this UV transformation section is for over in here. Now we're going to rotate this image 90 degrees, and there's a rotation channel here that will allow us to do it. Ooh, that's looking cool. That's starting to read a little bit more turtley, if you will. I like these little swirly patterns as they go from the front to the back, and I'm starting to dig it. So we get to modify how these images are going to be placed on top of our object by looking at all these UV transformations. All right, let's go back to the actual color value now. And we don't want it to be orange, so let's put the value back a little bit darker. Yeah, and that's a good look. That's interesting. I want shades of brown on mine, and we have shades of brown. I think I lost some of its value on the other one, but that's the cool thing about working with these fill layers. I can art direct after I've applied all these effects. I can go back in and I can make small adjustments to the color and start to get a really good understanding of how these colors are working together to create the final result. Let's add one more into the mix. I'm going to duplicate this layer one more time. This is going to be the third one. And for this third one, we want this one to be the highlight. So I'm going to change the value a little bit. Make it a little bit brighter. Maybe we go into more of the yellows on this one. Even have it be a green, a dark green might be kind of cool, but we'll go yellows. Yeah, that's a good place to begin. I don't like the pattern on there because when we duplicated the layer, we also duplicated the effect, the fill effect, and the associated image that's inside that fill effect. So let's go and give it a different shape. Let's put maybe some speckles in there. Yeah, that might be a cool difference. I'm digging that. However, the specks are much too big. So once again, let's return to the UV transforms and decrease the scale. Oh, I'm sorry, increase the scale. Yeah, that's starting to look much better. I'm not too happy with the color. I still have some art direction that I need to do to find a color that really kind of complements and works well with all the other shades of brown that are working inside of here. But this is starting to look pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with the result. We can very easily layer all these color channels together to help build the final result. And that really speaks to the power of the Substance Painter system, is that everything is available to us at all times. Working with fill layers, with masks, and then masking our layers with other images just gives us a tremendous amount of control that produces results that look pretty organic and pretty random. It looks natural. I don't want to go in and hand paint all of this. That would just be like mind-boggling, right? But having multiple layers all working together through a whole series of combined masks are going to give us a really great, fantastic looking result.